Hello, my name is Ethan Wills, and today we're going to be talking about horror movies and how they scare you. So, we all know that cinema and film is a huge part of our culture today. We is one of the largest mediums of entertainment in the world, and in that, one of the largest genres in the largest medium in the world is horror. And that comes from the fact that it's pretty easy to scare people. It's pretty easy to get into a cheap scare. So, I took my own shot at this and I created my own little 1-minute horror film. And before implementing all these strategies and other ideas from other horror films, and I just made my own little horror film. So why don't you guys take a look here. So now that we've seen what a terrible horror film looks like, we can now talk about what necessarily makes a good scary film versus what a bad scary film does. So what goes on here is fear is obviously comes from the idea of the fight or flight complex, which is a psychological thing. Unfortunately, when you are watching a movie, you are not actually in danger. So what is it about these horror movies that actually makes your mind and your brain feel like you are actually in danger? So it all has to do with the five senses. But primarily, when you are seeing a film, you are relying on two senses, the auditory sense and the visual sense. So let's talk about the auditory for a second. Auditorily, there are two ways that a horror film will scare you: through sounds and through music. It's no secret that music can be used to scare you and to increase tension in a certain scene. So, if we look at films like Jaws, for example, or Psycho, in which these have these hugely classic soundtracks, which are known for being incredibly terrifying. Let's take a look at the scene It and compare its actual soundtrack and that effect to the effect when I place the Seinfeld soundtrack over it. Now that we've talked about music in the horror films, we can talk about sound and how sound is used. Sound is used a lot more randomly and at keen points in a specific scene to raise attention and ultimately bring out a good scare. They're used alongside jump scares most commonly. Directors and sound editors use sounds that are disturbing, harsh to the ear to send our mind back into a primeval state where we hear these sounds and we associate them with danger. So when we hear these sharp, disturbing, harsh sounds, we associate them with danger, which triggers the fight or flight response, which is what fear is all about. So now that we've covered auditory, let's move on to visual scares. Visual scares are simpler in a way. So now that we've covered audio, let's move on to the visual side of scares. Visual scares may seem more simple, but in reality can be a lot more complicated. The simplest form of a visual scare is a jump scare, something sudden and unexpected that frightens the audience because it's something unexpected, but it doesn't necessarily scare you long term. Aside from jump scares, but with visual comes something that's very interesting to me: the fear of the unknown. And that's where we also start getting into the idea of the mind. So each person has their own unique experience and their own unique thing that scares them in that unknown. and this is usually done through darkness and mysterious silhouettes and stuff like that. And it is almost a disappointment when you actually see the monster, because something that may be scary to the people who made the film or is held back by the limitations of technology or costuming. Okay, so we've learned a lot about what a horror film is and how it scares you and what kind of strategies horror movie makers use to scare you. So let's take some of those strategies and see if we can make my trash film into less of a trash film. I'd say we weren't not successful in that. Well, thank you guys so much for joining me today, and as always, please like and subscribe.